Anyway, it's okay. And then there's so-called frameworks, right? And a nice way of thinking about frameworks actually is they're like templates. So they will allow you to start from, there's always a starting point, right? A scaffold, you have access to a scaffold. And then based on what you're doing, what you do is you edit the scaffold or the existing structure and add additional functionality depending on the complexity of the application that you're building, right? What you will find is that because the starting point is going to be dependent on what sort of application you're building, there are different types of web frameworks, right? So you will have, well, there are different types of software frameworks. You have web development frameworks, for instance, front-end development frameworks, right? These will help you, build generic web applications. Front-end development frameworks will help you build the front-facing part of an application that you might be building. You have back-end development frameworks, right? Allow you to quickly develop back-end code. I don't know if you are given context in terms of how you are going to go through this database-driven web applications course you're doing, but the database, for instance, forms part of the back-end, right? The reason you're going to be introduced to PHP, for instance, is PHP is used to write back-end scripts or back-end code. The reason you're going to look at HTML and CSS is because those technologies are used to build the front end, right? So as you're building the front end, you can have a starting point, an initial starting point, so that you don't waste time creating a button, right? So that you don't waste time figuring out how you're going to connect to a database, right? When you're building a database-driven application, everything is done for you. There are also mobile application frameworks, right? The world is changing here, it's fast changing. There are application frameworks that will allow you to build what? Platform agnostic mobile applications, right? So these applications that are not really targeted for a specific platform. They are cross-platform, right? There are also data with the rise of, data science. There are data science frameworks as well. So quite a lot of things here, right? Scaffolds, ideally. Classic example of front-end framework, right? I'm sure people have come across React. If you go to Go Zambia job, the people that are looking for developers almost certainly require that you have some experience with React, right? It's a framework, or Angular, because it turns out that in the real world, you don't write code from scratch. You're interested in making money. The way you can quickly make money is when you quickly ship product to the client, right? So a number of examples, right? Bootstrap, I thought I would include Bootstrap because you're going to be introduced to CSS. Dr. Walia will teach you how to write CSS code from scratch, but in the real world, you don't do that, right? In the real world, you don't write HTML pages and specify, so this button is going to be here, and the text field, and the label, and the combo box is going to be, no, right? You use a framework. This is a CSS framework. I thought I would showcase examples of Bootstrap. So if you use the Bootstrap front-end framework, you can quickly come up with an interface like this, right? Something that would probably take you a long time if you are writing HTML code and, or if you're writing a CSS code from scratch. Right? But what you do in this case is you just download the library, and then you link your HTML page, or you link that library to your HTML pages. So I thought I would also showcase an example. There's a toy project that I normally use when I'm interacting with students. It's called a Data Lab app. If you were to access this thing at your own time, what you realize, it might seem like quite a bit of work went into creating the interface, but zero work went into the interface because our focus was on the functionality, right? So what we did was we used Bootstrap as a CSS framework to come up with something like this, right? Frameworks. I hope you figure out what sort of frameworks you're going to use as you're working on the 3020 project, right? No, I don't think any of the questions are carved out in such a way that you can actually go and use an already existing system. No, in fact, we shall explicitly say that you cannot leverage integration and configuration where you're using a standalone system to, yes?
What would be an example of a framework in Java?
Spring MVC. Boy, it's a web framework. And I remember Spring MVC because once upon a time, I was obsessed with Java. It's been a while. I don't know if it should be. I think I've mentioned Spring MVC. So when you're building a web application, right? Any type of web application, database web application will have three things, right? You have your model, your view, and your controller. The view is the front end, right? The model is like this interface that you use to connect the database. The controller will be the thing that acts as a go-between between the interface and the database, for instance, or backend code, essentially, right? So if you have that generic approach, right, that you're taking to build a web-based application, you might as well use a web framework like Spring MVC. I don't know if Spring MVC is there, but I remember going through a process of evaluating different Java-based web frameworks, and I settled for Spring MVC. Granted, that was must have been 2012, 2011, 2012. It's been a while here. But there's probably more web frameworks, a lot of them. I apologize, I don't use languages like Java a lot myself. But also, I thought I would use the Data Lab app as an illustration on how you can leverage web frameworks, right? Or how you can leverage frameworks, not web frameworks, frameworks. So simple application, right? If you go to the GitHub repository, what you will notice is that somewhere in the README page, right, is an explicit statement that says we use these frameworks to build this simple application. For the front end, Bootstrap, right? I can't remember the version, must have been Bootstrap 3 here. This is an old thing, right? I don't know if you can see, like when I got a snapshot, here's done 4 years ago, if you notice, right? So it's been a while here, we probably need to update this. So we use Bootstrap for the front end, right? The database, right, is a document-based database that we use. MongoDB it's called, right? For us to quickly interface our application with MongoDB, we use the framework called Mongoose, right? For the backend code, of course, we're using JavaScript. It's JavaScript right through and through. So we're using Node, but the specific framework we're using, right, to write the backend code is called Express.js. It's a framework as well. So 3 frameworks we used here to build this simple application. And the beauty with using a framework here is we're able to quickly build the application. When you find time, if you look at the commit dates here, you notice that this was done in a short space of time. The amount of time spent on this would have been significantly longer if I was doing everything from scratch, right? So again, if you want to look up more on Express, of course you need to know JavaScript, right? This is a JavaScript-based framework, right? You can go here. There are details or instructions on how you can make use of Express, even detailed examples, right? Getting started guides. It's very easy to follow. It's not that hard. Mongoose equally has dedicated instructions on how you can leverage MongoDB, or Mongoose rather, not Mongoose, right? The framework is Mongoose. Mongoose is a framework that allows you to interact with a database called MongoDB, right? All right? And then Bootstrap, I already showcased an example of Bootstrap, right? Quite nice, actually, Bootstrap. Demos sometimes fail here, but let's see here if we can, what I'm going to do here is, because I'm lazy like that these days, I'm going to say, show me how to, well, show me HTML code for building a user registration form, right? I guess. By the way, there's a new breed of applications, the GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT now. They're saying we shall not have jobs, those of us that are planning to be developers or programmers, right? Because there are intelligent applications that can do things for you. I know most of you have looked into these things. So if I was to, I can showcase an example of doing this. So if I wanted to use Bootstrap, right? Initially, what I have is this code. I hope this code that ChatGPT has created for me makes sense. What I could do here is I could say, I'm just going to go to I'm just going to create just demos or something. And then in here, I'll just say ICT3020.html or something, right? Because I'm lazy like that, I don't want to write this raw HTML code, which Dr. Wali is probably going to teach you how to write. But, so the code that ChatGPT has shown me is this, right? If I open this page, right, this is how it would look like, yeah? This is a registration page, I mean, a very simple registration page. But normally, when you're building an application like this, you'd want to add aesthetic characteristics to this, right? Maybe you want the button to appear a certain way, right? You want the font that's used maybe by this to be presented in a certain manner or something. So what you do is you'd be writing CSS code, right? Cascading style sheet. You create a cascading style sheet file. But instead of creating that cascading style sheet file from scratch, you can use Bootstrap, right? So you'd go to the Bootstrap, hopefully the Bootstrap homepage here is going to be available here. So it's a Bootstrap, and then I would download Bootstrap. There are even detailed examples, by the way, on how to use this framework. Examples, a lot of them. But what I would do here is I would say I want to download Bootstrap, and I don't know where I can download this thing here. I thought there would be a download button somewhere. Download. Why is it so small? Download. I'm just going to download this and then come somewhere here and say I'm going to download the compiled version or something, right? So I'll download this, and then I will unzip it. Bootstrap, right? So I've unzipped it in here. I'll just this is where the person was asking, do you create a same folder? If you notice the way I'm using this thing, right? I'm going to do this, and then I'll tell ChatGPT here, because I'm lazy like that, I'll just tell ChatGPT to say, add code to connect Bootstrap locally or something. And hopefully this thing will understand, right? There we go. Yes, I've already downloaded Bootstrap. Hopefully this, come on, this works. Okay, there we go. So, and I hope, there we go. This is what I wanted here. You see the code that's there? You probably don't, but this thing, use the registration form. I asked for area. You guys, you should play around. You should be playing around with the ChatGPT, right? But don't. I was telling the first years, don't use it to cheat in the assignments, because, you know. so you will notice the difference just now. Once this finishes, I didn't want to write this from scratch. Otherwise, I would have wasted a little bit of time. So we will cheat a little here. This is a demo. So you understand this, right? I'm going to connect to a web framework, a UI, a CSS framework, right? Okay, so I'm just going to go up here and just copy this thing here. Copy this code and observe. What I'm going to do here now is, I'm going to say, I'll just create a copy here and call this BS as in Bootstrap, right? And then in here, I'll just delete and replace it with a code that ChatGPT has just created. But I know that somewhere on top here, you'll notice that this is linking to, I see what this thing is doing here. It's messing things up here, but this is because the location of thing is in Bootstrap and CSS, right? You notice here, it's in here. So what I would want to do is to link it to this, right? Hopefully this will work here. So here, I'll just paste it like so. So again, if we were to go here, hopefully things have worked, I hope. But if we were to go here, where we had this window, this is the normal page. And if the linking with Bootstrap has worked, the one that has BS should be able to look different. It's the same form, But I haven't even written a single CSS. I haven't written any CSS code. All I'm doing is I'm using a framework. But remember what we said about what you can do with a framework? You can modify it, right? Because it's a starting point. So if you're not happy with, I don't know what you prefer, this or this. I know what I prefer. I prefer this myself. But if you're not happy with things like, oh, the font face for these buttons, right? Or the background color for the buttons, I don't want it to be blue because I'm creating this for Unza, and Unza branding colors is green. Then what you do is you modify Bootstrap, right, to suit your need or something. You know, but the key thing is there's a starting point, and for certain framework, like CSS frameworks, the starting point is perfect. It will create aesthetically pleasing interfaces. Anyways, that's that. I hope this kind of